You're already a successful farmer, but what if you could dig a little deeper? To take in a wealth of knowledge on topics like farm profitability, grain marketing, leadership skills, and more. Build your knowledge, strengthen your foundation, and move from experienced to expert. Welcome to GrowU.
This is why I'm passionate about farm marketing. It's a great privilege for me to get to speak to farmers around the country, and specifically to those of you in Ohio, my home state. And I think it's just a great privilege and opportunity that we have these natural resources, this good earth. We have the opportunities to be good stewards of that and bring outside dollars into our communities. I just think that's just a wonderful thing, and it's great to be a part of. Hello, I'm Dwayne with White Commercial. I'm here to talk with you about farm marketing. I've been working with U.S. producers and specifically Ohio producers here in the last 15 years in order to help them market their grain. We're not out to try and just figure out how to hit the highs, but how do we go about with a plan to capture profitable prices that help you continue to farm year after year? So let's talk about the goal of farm marketing. I know when we hear that term, farm marketing or marketing grain, there's a lot of concepts behind that. And I ask the question a lot in farmer meetings, what is your goal in capturing prices in the market? And invariably, somebody in the crowd raises their hand and says, to get as much as I can get. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't do it for us. It doesn't give us anything to shoot for. It doesn't help us establish anything meaningful as far as goals. And so when we talk about the goal of farm marketing, it's not about hitting the highest prices, but let's step back and think about it this way. Let's take all the inputs, all the assets you have, which would be the land, relationship with landlords, all the equipment you have, and certainly it takes money to plant a crop in the ground. And you take all those assets, you bury them in the ground essentially, and you hope for a crop that produces well. And the goal of farm marketing is to protect that asset, that investment that you have. And so we need to market the grain in order that at the end of a season, you have better land, better relationships, and certainly more money, right? So with that, our goals are going to be oriented around capturing profitability that allows you to keep doing that year in and year out. Another way of thinking about it is we have an opportunity in marketing our grain to pull outside dollars into our local communities. And we have a great opportunity and privilege with that, right? We have these assets, and as long as we're good stewards of them, we can market our grain, and there's opportunities in the Chicago Board of Trade in the market to lock in high prices, which is really helping us pull money that is outside of our communities into our rural communities, which is really the backbone of our local economies. And so I want to take a moment here and let's break these opportunities down into 3 time periods. Let's look at pre-harvest, during harvest, and post-harvest. So we're going to take just a minute and look at these. So as we begin to talk about these periods, one part of that is time, right? We're talking about times in these periods. And so the Chicago Board of Trade gives us an opportunity for over 2 years to price our crop prior to harvest. In that time, there's lots of information that we might read or we might hear. There's a lot of people that are trying to get our attention and tell us what they think the market's going to do. And with that, there's a challenge then that we, especially if we don't have a plan in place, that we start marketing grain out of our emotion and marketing it out of what we think the market may do rather than having a plan in place and capturing prices that we know are going to be profitable to our operation. As we think about this pre-harvest season, it even gets worse as time starts running out and we approach that harvest season. So as we have less time, emotions tend to play a lot more into that. So we need to be careful, make sure that we're doing our plan. So as we talk about the harvest period, it's a short window, 5-6 weeks, something like that, that you have to market your grain while you're harvesting, and that's really tough. And it's usually the highest supply in the market. And so what do we usually have, right? The lowest prices, typically. Not every year, but typically. So it's important, again, to market your grain in those opportunities pre-harvest. As we move into the harvest season, we're probably settling for a price rather than actually capturing a price. You can go back and look at 5, 10, 15, 20 years of history and see that that the majority of your pricing opportunity happens in this pre-harvest season. The importance in that is to keep in mind that you need a plan, otherwise you'll ride that emotional roller coaster of whether it's a good price or not and maybe miss some opportunities that you have in the pre-harvest season. As we move from the harvest period to the post-harvest period, there's one major consideration that we need to take into account post-harvest, and that is cost. We didn't have any marketing cost in pre-harvest or during the harvest period, but when you move into post-harvest, cost is the issue. You're going to have cost in at least one of three ways. You're going to have cost in putting the grain in your bin and maintaining condition of it. You're going to have cost if you deliver to the elevator and put it on storage. There's definitely going to be some sort of cost there. And then the third cost that you have to take into account is the cost of interest. If I'm not selling the grain and I'm putting it in bins and storing it, I don't have that money, and I could be either using it for operation or gaining the interest on it. So that's really the thing we've got to talk about in the post-harvest, is that cost factor, because there are marketing opportunities where there's some higher prices post-harvest, but most of the time you're working to get back to those earlier levels when you take those costs into account. So that's one major thing you need to think about when you're developing your marketing plan. So to kind of wrap up talking about these periods, there's three fundamental patterns you need to take into account. Prior to harvest, seasonally, there are pricing opportunities. May, June, July, you really need to be looking at what pricing opportunities are there. Know that during harvest, it's usually your lowest price, and know that post-harvest, you're usually just playing catch up. So keep those 3 points in mind, because here's the deal. In working with farmers over the years in these time periods, what I found is that a lot of farmers take a price because they have to, or they sell because they have to, regardless of whether that price is profitable or not. We want to help you by having a plan that locks in profitable prices so that you sell because it's profitable, not because you have to. So we've been talking about these challenges, and we need to transition to this word I've been saying, plan, and talking about what a plan is. And I've been using a plan for many years now, and it's a very simple plan called a 5-step plan. And so we're going to look at those 5 steps briefly. Now, let's be real. I know that most of you that farm, you're farming because you like the activities that farming allows you to do. One of the activities you're probably not crazy about is selling your grain. It's the thing that a lot of farmers struggle with doing, and it does take some discipline to sit down and put pencil to paper and write out a plan. And that's why I know, and on some level, this is going to be very fundamental and it's very simple. But I want to encourage you, this is very important to being able to make a decision about your grain and marketing it profitably. Let's look at step 1. Step 1 is simply figuring out your production. You need to look at all the acres and also all the commodities that you're going to be planting, especially soybeans. And we're going to take the number of acres times the expected yield for each crop in order that we get a production number that we know we have this amount of bushels that we need to sell. So step 1, figuring out your production. So step 2, not as fun as step 1, we need to look at the cost of production. So I know everybody has a different way of doing this, but we want to make sure we at least get the fundamental groups of cost in there. What are you spending on chemicals? What are you spending on land rent? What are you spending on seed? And all the other agronomy costs that you have in there. And also for your time and fuel and energy. And taking that and having a number that figures out cost of production per acre, much like we did in the average production per acre. So step 2, we are figuring out the cost of production per acre. So step 3, setting a profit goal. We're not going for as much as I can get, right? That doesn't work. We need to have some kind of a goal. And I encourage you to put a goal per acre. How many dollars per acre is it that I intend to make with this year's crop? And then we're going to take that number and apply it to step 4. So step 4, we're actually taking the data that we gathered from steps 1, 2, and 3. In step 1, we have the production number. Step 2, we have the cost of production. And then in step 3, we have the goal that we want, the amount of money we want to make. And we can take those 3 numbers and calculate a target price per bushel. And that's what we want in step 4, is we want to identify a level in the market that we want to lock in. We know if we sell that price that we're getting the profit that we have a goal for. So step 5 is a little different. Step 5 is not simply, but it's emphatically take action. You can do all the planning in the world, but if you don't take some action, it's just numbers on a page. So step 5, a very important part of the process here, is to take action. Put a target order in for that target price. So we've completed the 5 steps, but you're not done yet. There's things that change. We're in a market with lots of variability, and so sometimes it means that we need to tweak our plan. So don't just stuff it in a drawer somewhere once you're done. Let's pull it out, keep it handy, and tweak it every once in a while in order that we make sure that we're still actively pursuing profitable prices. And by tweaking, I mean you may need to adjust your production, right? As we get further into the planning and the growing season, things change, environments change, the weather changes, things happen. And so maybe you need to adjust your expected production. Maybe the market's doing something where you need to adjust your expectations. Maybe we wanted too high of a pricing goal for that. So we need to drop that back and adjust it in order that we lock in prices that are still profitable before we get into harvest and we take our lowest price, right? So one more aspect we want to take into account is how much grain you're selling throughout the year. And I want to give you just some ideas for that. In looking at 20 years of history, one of the things identified is it's good to look at selling about 10% of your crop a year out. If the opportunity is not there or good prices aren't there, don't sell it. But if you're harvesting a crop and you see that there's good prices on the board for next year's crop, you might think about locking in maybe up to 10% of that. Next, I like to encourage people to look at maybe selling another 15% during the winter months. Sometimes events happen. In January, we have a production report of the previous crop, and that sometimes creates fluctuations in the market. So maybe in January, you're looking at having some targets working to get another 15% of your crop locked in. Next, let's talk about maybe selling 25% of our production during spring pricing and planting season. In February, we know that the U.S. government with the crop insurance program gives us a February spring price for those of us here in Ohio. And so at the end of February, we know what that price guarantee is on the spring price, and we know that we need to market our grain above that spring price in order to get the insurance, full insurance amount for that portion of our bushels. And so that, along with the planting season, there's opportunities. The market starts to fluctuate as we get into planting season. And so during that time period, maybe step up and try and get another 25% sold there. So that brings us up to about 50%. And I know that's a lot for some of you, but we're talking about being proactive about locking in profitable prices. If those opportunities are there, great, lock them in. If not, then we're carrying a higher percentage into the late spring, early summertime period where we really see price volatility with the end of the planting season, early growing season. There's lots of opportunity to lock in. So that's where we want to get that total percentage up closer to 75% is what we're looking at this time period. So that leaves us with the last 25% to sell, and you'll have a better idea what to do with that as the growing season continues and the crop comes to maturity. You'll have a better idea of what you have in the field and what you have left to sell. And there are those years where there is some kind of harvest rally and you still have 25% that you can sell into that portion of the season. So this is all part of tweaking the plan, is having some ideas and goals about getting your crop sold at different times of the year, which spreads out your risk, right? Because we know that there are different times of the year that we see pricing opportunities, and every year is a little bit different. So this is just one way that you might think about setting up your plan for selling your crops. Okay, we've talked about the goals of farm marketing. We've talked about the challenges of farm marketing, and we've given you some ideas for solutions in order that we market our grains with a plan rather than with emotion. Some of the best plans that you can have are worthless if we don't do anything with them. So I want to encourage you, take the time to write your plan, filter out the noise, look at your production, come up with goals, set targets, and take action on it. It is ultimately what is going to bring profit not only to your farm, but to the communities in which we work and live. So one last final word to you as we wrap this thing up. Work your farm marketing plan, or the market will work you.